Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Kępczyński. I would like to continue to post some information in regards to how to make the planning more effective and efficient in your organization. We continue to elaborate on how to make the planning coherent across the planning horizons and levels. And main part of this coherent frameworks, it is actually a well-established process called integrated business planning, but then we position this with the extension to the financial planning, and we would like to showcase to you how it actually could really work on the technology side, because we had a lot of requests really to make it more tangible to you. But prior we go to the deep dive into technology demonstrations on the next videos, I would like to put us on the same page from the context of the process and some change management before we deep dive into the technologies. But still, I will try to do this part as well here today with you. So we go to the how to unlock the value of integrated business planning combined with financial first, and then we go into the how the system and technology could enable it on SAP IBP and SAP Analytic Cloud. So what we see here is an overall framework of enterprise-wide business planning. So what it means is that in planning, we have various horizons, various granularity, group of stakeholders and their interest. So the objective of putting everything together is really to enable a strategic planning to cascade its objective through the planning to the operations and execution. What it means as well is that we have to have a closed loop from the operation execution to correct any kind of the plans in the respective planning horizon. So what we see here is that we have three planning horizons, I would say. Main ones is a strategic planning, which in various industries takes up to maybe 7 to 10 years, like in pharma, in the industrial companies, or in automotive, takes as long as a platform management by the automakers is being managed. So for the few years, for sure. In some industries, it's a little bit shorter, but 2-3 years. It also depends on how the flexible supply chain and the business planning is actually about. So this strategic planning, it's mainly done on an annual level, and it actually covers a number of the processes which I will highlight in a moment. Another block which actually have a lot of synergies, therefore combining those together and start an integration of the planning processes into one framework from this block of the processes makes really a huge sense, a lot of sense. So combining financial planning and integrated business planning, so changing really some dynamics into existing processes which are done by finance or done or led by the supply chain, makes really a huge impact on the organization from the decision-making standpoint. Last not least, we have a third type of a horizon. It's very short-term oriented. It's for the operation planning and execution. All of those should actually be synchronized and connected through the one connected planning process. So therefore, it is important to understand the characteristics of the process. That one, it's mostly in value and its frequency is actually annual. The second is, depending on the company, sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly. I'm talking about financial planning here. Integrated business planning typically is executed on a monthly basis, but there are some process steps which are less frequently executed, but still it's connected to the operational planning, which covers a short-term horizon. But having a visibility of the whole horizon for the business and the people who manage the business is critical. So thinking of it that they are like a separate elements of it is not really what the business wants. What business wants actually to manage a whole horizon with the coherent process and have an overview of those horizons with a different set of granularities, setting the different objective, different routines, and the people who are running it. But it's important to connect them in a proper way, so then it's easier to manage and control the business. If we go to the next slide, one of the key observations which we have from the past is that connecting integrated business planning with financial planning is the most beneficial connection at the whole transformation. Still, it's the most really toughest one. Let's deep dive into that thing. So what you see here is the following. So here we actually see the elements of the strategic planning processes. Those are marked in black, where the definition of the strategy is being refreshed once per year, typically. It's part of this strategic planning process. It's a long range planning. So very often companies plan their introduction of the new products, but going really further, more about the planning, the introduction of the new technologies, and really a big changes in the portfolio. It's very often combined with the market planning, meaning what markets they would like to evolve in, what markets they would like to grow in, and the growth plan combined from it, right? It's actually being followed, but very often executed by the supply chain and operations function, a process which is really addressing, do we have enough of the supply chain and operations capability to meet this type of an objectives, meaning do we have to set up the external manufacturing, tollers, some sort of a subcontracting as part of the process, maybe as well plan some investments. And then finally, it's really as well planning their own resources and investments in their own resources. Once per year, though, it is really very common that we actually use these 3 strategic planning processes to detail the objectives for the next year, so for the next year budget. But going forward, it's very often the case that this type of a process needs to be connected to the monthly routine, which helps to define, for example, a baseline for the budgeting process, and then help to combine the strategic objective into the budget coming from the other strategic planning processes. So then you can combine a 2 set of the process flow. One, it's more strategic, and second is more about the integrated business planning combined with financials, which helps you to develop the right baseline for your planning of the budget. But still, once this is being approved and finalized, we actually have to connect that on a regular basis to the monthly planning process. And this monthly planning process refers to the budget, which is represented in mostly in value, but like in revenues, in cost, in margin, and as well very often on a high level rather in the specific volumes, right? And it's being compared to the respective output for the respective process steps here below. So if we go further a little bit into the more details about the integrated business planning and combined with financials, which are marked in yellow. As I said, it's one of the most beneficial integration in the whole enterprise business planning framework. I mean, I would personally advise to start from it and then connect the second thing, which is connecting operation planning properly to this process. Because what we observe as well is that very often connection between the strategy and this monthly process happens through the budgeting somehow naturally. But if we go into the details of these 5 process steps here, I hope it will be clear to you what we mean by that. So we use the framework of integrated business planning. So product review, demand, supplier, integrated reconciliation, management, business review. And we extend it with all the financial activities which are needed in order to plan your finances. What it means is that we don't only plan what is in the future, we combine it with the past, and then whole data set, so whole view from the past combined with the future on a scenario level is being compared to the budget. So the objective of combination or combining the financial planning and the integrated business planning is to have a really one plan which drive the business. You've heard this many times, most probably, but it's very hard to make if you don't connect really the finance into the transformation process. Therefore, connecting finance becomes a critical element of success in planning your process change, but as well planning your new technologies, planning technologies. So if we go further, what it means is the following, that in the product review, we plan an introduction of the products, like I said in the previous slides, for the maybe horizon up to 24 to 36 months. In most of the cases, some industry longer, right? We actually planning the introduction in volumes, but as well revenue. We're planning the specific cost of this new products, potentially as well, how do we boost the sales of the new products with providing samples to the organization, sales organization, which will actually use it for the commercial purposes. So then in the demand review, typically we talk about forecasting the product demands in volume, but this type of a thinking which we actually presenting here today, it is really about the planning a complete net revenue. It means that you plan other streams of the revenue, not only coming from the product, but coming from the services, licenses. You might have as well consider some commercial provision. You're planning your discounts or gross to net conversion for the on-invoice discounts and off-invoice discounts. So you're planning the whole block of activities which are in the traditional sales and operation planning or IBP led by the supply chain is not being fully exploited. And then once it's there combined, you can actually really connect in a better way a finance and the supply chain and commercial for those two process steps. So they are actually on purpose connected to the profit and loss statement structure, which actually populated on the right hand side. As I said, it's not only about the planning the future, but combining past data with the plans for the future on a scenario level. Then really the objective is to generate a plan which could be done in the profit and loss structure. So first 2 points are actually before the introduction of the constraints are should address the net revenue. Then in the supply review, typically it's about planning a feasible supply, so distribution plan, transportation plan, feasible plan for the material requirements, feasible plan for the capacities for own and external resources. But this point, when we look on new ways of planning, it is really about as well planning your costs. So you have a variable part and a fixed part. Variable should come really from defining the process streams which will help you to then be monetized. For example, a material requirements, subcontracting requirements, transportation requirements could be then converted to the specific cost stream and then plan accordingly. Right? So this is really an extension. Then reconciliation, it's not about a supply and demand balancing anymore only, it's more about as well finding the most profitable and feasible scenario. So really managing the net revenues and the costs and the volume associated to it, hours or whatever the unit of measure in supply chain is being used, is part of the reconciliation. So really planning your gross profit, so meaning really connecting the impact from the volume side, from the net revenues and the costs together in the one process makes really this process different compared to the past, how it was done in the past. Last not least, we have a few other process steps. It's really about a management business review. Objective of the process does not change really significantly, meaning to make a decision, to make a most profitable decision for the business. But the way it's done and enabled is then completely different because we connect here, as I said, commercial processes, supply chain, and financial planning processes. Equipping management with the full-blown planning of the profit and loss, combining with the past on a scenario level, with explaining the drivers and assumptions behind those scenarios and plans is part of the management business review. So giving the management enough of the information to make a proper decision how to allocate the resources, money, and how to manage risk and opportunities in the business. This type of a planning is actually being combined with as we call it, lean financial forecasting. If you're addressing, as we will go to here to the right-hand side of this picture, all the planning process steps up to the gross margin through the steps from 1 to 5. Very often the step number 6 is before 5, but in some companies it's after, because it's actually less critical for the business, or at least it's done once per quarter. It means the leading financial forecasting addresses in more depth and more extent really all the elements of the profit and loss which are beyond the gross margin, gross profit planning. And then combining this into one environment makes really a huge difference. So one of the critical elements of the transformation is enabling a change for the financial controllers. They have to change the way they operate in this business planning process. So if we use the framework from the integrated business planning, sales operation planning, and expand it with the financial planning, or combine it, as I'm saying, it makes really a completely different picture. What it means is that those process steps here on the level 2, which are the decision forums. So really it's about making a decision about the product introduction, substitution, segmentation, how this would be used to make the processes more effective, how to planning your demand associated to the product, but as well revenues, as we discussed, supply, combining supply planning, but as well cost planning, right? And then planning at the end, which ends up on the full profit and loss structure, can be only enabled if financial controllers are part of the game, not only of those decision-making forums, where I illustrated on the graphics on the right-hand side, where you actually see that this is being done only in extent maybe of the quarter of the year, of the time allocated to the planning activities. Most of the time would controllers need to spend with the other group of stakeholders to develop the decision making, which happens on the level 2 in the process. So meaning developing a cost planning with the team together as part of the supply review, preparation for the supply review meeting, developing the net revenue plan based on the drivers and assumptions which were captured by the commercial, marketing, and demand planning organization. So really actively really contribute to the process, but not only on the meeting level, which happens here, product review, demand, supply, integrated reconciliation and management, business review, but as well in the enabling processes. So then this in synchronization, but as well harmonization of the activities can happen in a much better way. So one of the key change, I would say, to make the connection between integrated business planning and financial planning is redefining the role of the financial controllers in the planning process. Let's continue further. What does it mean in more depth? I would not go maybe through all the activities which are listed here. This is an example from the book I wrote some while ago. Since then, collected a lot of use cases which are as well more richer than just this list of the activities. But I would just wanted to illustrate that the financial controllers will have a significant contribution in making those plans fully recognized from the financial impact standpoint. So management and the people who take decisions on the specific on the respective process steps marked below would actually see the full financial impact of their activities. But in order to do that, really those activities would need to be planned accordingly as part of the planning calendar. Another critical element of making the connection between IBP and financial planning is harmonizing and aligning the planning calendars between those group of stakeholders. Which groups of stakeholders I'm talking about? I'm talking about aligning between the commercial, supply chain, and finance. This is an example from one of the customer discussions we had. So we discussed how to do that. So first of all, we actually have mapped all the critical meetings in the organization and tried to position this against the framework from integrated business planning, which has a 5 process steps marked in orange here. So we additionally map the process meetings which are associated to finance. So management reporting, performance review, the planning and profit and loss planning, balance sheet review, as well as publication of the quarterly financial forecast, right? So and we actually try to put this into the one process framework. What it means is that we actually did backward schedule all the meetings which are relevant for the IBP and financial planning from the point of the quarterly financial reporting and the monthly update of the financial figures. And then all the activities we did schedule backwards. What's the benefit of it? The benefit of it is that at the end, through that type of an approach, you're actually building through the process step the P&L. Actually, if the finance is contributing not only on decision-making forum, but as well on the enabling processes, as we discussed earlier, it will help really to make this connection. And we think that if you don't have a harmonized planning calendar, naturally you will develop a number of the plans because the teams will work not according to the same objective and same goal, which is, for example, developing a plan, integrated business plan in volume and in value, right? Meaning revenue, cost, profit, and in the profit and loss structure, according to the dates which are linked to the financial reporting. That's a critical, I would say, element of this solution. But that's not actually the only one. The other one is really important how to do it. As I said earlier, first of all, it's important to understand all of those critical meetings, their objectives, what type of stakeholders are there. You see on the top of the slide, the example how we actually map that. So it means that in order to do that, you have to really deep dive into the details of those meetings and try to sequence them according to the required alignment, meaning backwards schedule all the meetings which are relevant, maybe reshuffle some of the scope of the meetings in order to meet the objective of the target model. And then how to reach this design on a process level, which will actually connect the integrated business planning with financial. First of all, you need to understand what type of an activities are being performed in which process steps. So you see here with the different set of the colors like white or a gray or a yellow, activities which are then connected to the relevant process steps. So we actually have made a list of activities for each of the meeting, and then we figure out which really process step, to which process step those activities should belong to, and as well what element in the profit and loss statement they actually impact. So then we actually try to make a more detailed mapping, not only on the meeting level, but then on activities level. And then those activities we connected to the process steps, because we wanted to build the profit and loss as part of the revised process. And as well, we actually connected those activities to the line in the profit and loss. So then we were able to understand the proper connection between the commercial, supply chain operation and financial planning together. And this was a huge thing because at the end, controllers through that type of a mapping were as well able to understand better all the connection between the commercial and supply chain planning and its impact to the finance, and vice versa, which is very important for the other stakeholder groups. So we talk about a few steps how to really make this connection. And let's not forget about last and very important one, which is really about enabling technologies. This type of an integration requires thinking about really from end-to-end perspective. It means that, example, master data has to cover a master data element from commercial, supply chain, and finance. Cost center, profit center, mapping of the legal entities. Every case has to be really mapped together into the coherent planning solution. So then the elements which are required by the commercial, by the supply chain and finance might be on a different granularity. That's very often the case, and that's normal. But the system solution should actually help us to connect the different granularity requirements, different master data into the framework which supports the process requirement. So therefore, it's very often the case that you have to have in your planning solution a feasibility to run a proper data modeling, scenario planning, segmentation. You should have a possibility really to support the processes with the higher automation that it was in the past, with the use of the predictive function, machine learning, or maybe even artificial intelligence as part of the planning process. But then planning process understood as an end-to-end planning process, which covered commercial, supply chain, and finance. So I think that's very critical. And as part of discussions and this video blog, we'll try to elaborate more about how to connect the processes and technology into the coherent solution. So in the second part of the video, we'll do the deep dive into discussion on the SAP IBP and SAP Analytic Cloud.